John lived alone on the edge of a frozen valley. His small wooden cabin stood near the forest, far from any town. Every evening after work, he returned tired, carrying tools covered in red dust from the mining fields. Life was quiet, simple, and cold. He liked it that way. But this evening, something felt different. When he pushed open the door, a strange warmth greeted him. The smell of cooked food filled the air. His boots froze mid-step. He never cooked anything that smelled this good. The fire in the hearth was burning bright. His kitchen lights were on. Someone was inside his home. John's first thought was that it could be thieves, maybe scavengers. He quietly reached for the knife on his belt and moved closer. The floor creaked under his boots. He turned the corner to his kitchen and stopped. A girl stood there. Not human. She was young, maybe in her early 20s if compared to human age. Her skin had a soft blue glow under the light. Long silver hair fell across her shoulders, and her eyes were bright like a pair of stars. She wore one of his shirts, far too large for her, and was stirring something in a pot. When she saw him, the wooden spoon slipped from her hand and hit the floor. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The fire popped quietly behind her. John's voice came out slow. "Who are you?" The alien girl backed away, pressing herself against the wall. "Please, don't call them," she whispered. Her voice trembled, full of fear. John lowered his knife a little. "Call who?" She looked toward the window as if expecting something outside. Her body shook. "The hunters," she said softly. The word made no sense to John. "I don't know any hunters. You broke into my cabin. Start explaining." Her glowing eyes met his for the first time. There was no threat in them, only terror. She shook her head. "I had nowhere else to go. I ran for 2 nights. I needed warmth. I'm sorry. Please, I'll leave when they pass." John sighed, still confused but no longer angry. He looked at the pot on the stove. Soup. Real soup. His old vegetables, a bit of dried meat she had cooked with what little he had. The smell was good, too good for him to ignore. "You cooked?" he asked quietly. She nodded slowly. "I thought maybe you would not be angry if your home smelled alive." John rubbed his forehead. He had seen aliens before, miners, traders, smugglers, but never one like her. Her skin had patterns, faint glowing lines that pulsed softly with each breath. She looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept for days. He took a cautious step forward. "Sit, don't run." She hesitated, then slowly sat down at the wooden table. He placed his knife on the counter and sat across from her. For a while there was silence. Only the sound of the fire crackling and wind outside. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Lyra," she said. "From the Cathari colony." He frowned. He'd heard that name before. Cathari. Refugees. The war had destroyed their home years ago. Some said their people could bend light and energy. Others said they were cursed. "You came from the North Ridge?" he asked. She nodded. "My ship crashed. They're looking for me." John looked at her wrist. A small metallic band blinked faintly. A tracker, maybe. That explained the fear. "Who's looking?" he asked. Lyra swallowed hard. "Soldiers from my world. They don't want me alive." The words made John's stomach twist. Something about the way she said it, cold, certain, made him believe her. He stood and checked the window. The snow was falling heavier now, covering old footprints. "You can't stay long," he said. "If they find you here, they'll find me too." Lyra's head dropped. "I know, I just needed one night." John looked at her again. The fear, the shaking hands, the tired eyes, she wasn't dangerous. Just lost. He poured 2 bowls of soup and placed one in front of her. She looked surprised. "Eat," he said. "You made it." "Might as well have some." Her lips curled into a faint smile. "Humans are strange." "Yeah, I hear that a lot," John muttered. They ate in silence. The storm outside grew louder. The wind howled through the cracks of the wooden walls. The fire flickered low, throwing long shadows across the room. For a moment, John almost forgot she was an alien. She looked almost peaceful, sitting there quietly, her silver hair catching the light. After they finished, she whispered, "Thank you." John stood up and shrugged. "You can sleep on the couch." "Just for tonight?" Lyra nodded gratefully. "I won't cause trouble." He started toward his room but stopped at the door. Something in his gut told him this wasn't over. He turned slightly and said, "If someone comes looking, you hide. Understand?" She nodded. "I understand." John went to his room, but he didn't sleep. He kept listening, to the wind, to the crackle of the fire, and to her slow, quiet breathing in the next room. Outside, somewhere beyond the snow and darkness, a faint hum echoed. Like engines passing far above the valley, Lyra's words replayed in his mind. "They're looking for me." John turned his gaze toward the window. The night sky glowed faintly red for a second, then faded. He didn't know what he had just stepped into, but he knew one thing. This girl had brought trouble straight to his doorstep, and yet, for the first time in years, his cabin didn't feel empty anymore. The morning came slowly. Snow covered everything outside the cabin. A pale light shone through the window, painting the room silver and quiet. John sat at the table, drinking from a metal cup, watching the small alien girl sleep on his couch. Her silver hair spread across the blanket like threads of light. For a moment she looked peaceful, almost human. He still couldn't believe she was real. The night before felt like a dream. An alien girl breaking into his home, begging him not to call someone, speaking of hunters and danger. He wanted to believe she was just lost, but his instincts told him otherwise. When she woke, she looked around in confusion until her eyes met his. Her expression turned wary again, like a wild creature ready to run. "You're safe," John said quietly. No one came. Lyra sat up slowly. Her movements were weak. "I didn't mean to stay long," she said. "I'll go once the storm clears." John glanced outside. The wind was howling, snow swirling so thick you could barely see the trees. "You won't last an hour out there," he said. "You can stay until it stops." She looked uncertain, then nodded. "Thank you." John returned to his tools, pretending to work. But his mind kept circling back to her. Every few minutes he glanced at her wrist, the strange metal band still blinking faintly. "That thing," he said, pointing. "It's a tracker, isn't it?" Her eyes widened. She hid her arm under the blanket. "It's broken," she said quickly. He didn't believe her, but he didn't push. "You said they were hunting you. Who are they?" She hesitated. "Soldiers from the Empire, my kind. They want what's inside me," John frowned. "Inside you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked toward the window. "They're close," she whispered. John stood and looked outside. The storm made it impossible to see. "You're imagining it," he said, though a chill ran down his spine. "No," she said, voice shaking. "I can feel their signal." He took a deep breath. "Then we hide you." Without another word, she followed him to a trap door beneath the rug. It led to a small storage pit where he kept tools and supplies. She crouched inside as he covered it again, leaving only a small crack for air. Minutes later, a low hum passed over the cabin. The windows rattled. John froze. Through the frosted glass, he saw a shadow moving across the snow, a flying drone scanning the ground with red lights. It hovered for a few seconds, then moved toward the forest. He didn't breathe until it disappeared. Then he lifted the trapdoor. Lyra looked up at him, her glowing eyes wide. "You were right," he said quietly. She climbed out, trembling. "They will come back. They always do." John placed more wood in the fire. "Then you stay inside. We'll figure something out." She looked at him as if trying to understand why he was helping her. "You don't even know me," she said. He shrugged. "You're in my house." "That's reason enough," she smiled faintly. It was small, but it softened her face. "Humans are strange," she said again. "Yeah," John replied. "You said that already." The storm raged all day. Outside, the world vanished into white. Inside, the cabin became a fragile island of warmth and silence. Lyra helped him clean, her movements careful and light. She asked questions about the tools, the fire, and the strange things humans ate. Her curiosity almost made him forget the danger outside. As night fell, the storm eased. They ate together again. John told her about Earth, about oceans and green forests, things she had never seen. In return, she told him a little about her world, how the sky shimmered with light and how her people once lived in peace before the Empire turned on them. When she spoke of the hunters, her voice grew heavy. "They erase anyone who carries the old power," she said softly. "They say it's dangerous. What power?" John asked. She looked at her hands, faint light running through her skin. "Life energy. We can heal or destroy with it. I didn't want it. I was born with it." John stared at her in silence. He didn't know if he should believe her. But one thing was clear, she was running from something real. Suddenly, a faint beep came from her wrist. Her face went pale. They found the signal. John jumped to his feet. "We have to shut it off." I can't, she said. It's locked to my pulse. Outside, a faint red glow flashed through the snow. The drone had returned. This time it wasn't alone. Lyra's voice broke into a whisper. They're here. John grabbed his rifle and blew out the lantern. The cabin fell into darkness. He looked at her and said in a low voice, "Stay behind me. Whatever happens, don't run." The wind outside howled again, and the sound of engines drew closer. The hunters had come. The storm had quieted, but the silence that followed was worse. John moved slowly to the window, careful not to make a sound. The night outside was bright with moonlight, the snow reflecting pale blue across the ground. The sound of engines had stopped, replaced by faint mechanical clicks, like metal feet moving through the forest. Lyra crouched near the fire, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She clutched her wrist where the tracker light blinked weakly. "They're scanning," she whispered. John didn't answer. He looked through the small crack in the shutter. A shadow moved between the trees, then another. Tall figures with armor that shimmered like glass. They carried long weapons that pulsed with blue energy. They moved with cold precision like hunters who already knew where their prey was hiding. He turned back to Lyra. "We have to move, now." She looked terrified. "There's nowhere to go. If we run, they'll see us. If we stay, they'll find us," John thought fast. He grabbed his rifle and a heavy coat. "We go through the storage hatch," he said. "There's a path behind the ridge. It leads to the old outpost." Lyra stood up shakily. "That place is dead. No power." "That's exactly why we'll survive," he said. He opened the hatch in the floor again. Cold air rushed up from the tunnel below. The passage led out through a narrow gap behind the cabin. Lyra hesitated at the edge, fear in her eyes. John looked at her firmly. "Move." She nodded and climbed down. John followed, closing the hatch above them just as a loud thud echoed through the cabin. Someone or something had landed on the roof. They crawled through the narrow tunnel. The sound of boots and shifting metal followed them above. Lyra's breathing grew fast and shallow. John whispered, "Quiet." Snow dust fell through the cracks as something heavy stepped above them. Then a voice, sharp and cold, spoke in an alien tongue. Lyra's body froze at the sound. "That's the commander," she whispered. He led the experiments. John's chest tightened. He could hear the floorboards creak above, then a hiss of static as one of the soldiers spoke into a communicator. They were scanning the area. They had minutes at most. He pushed forward until he reached the exit, lifting the wooden cover carefully. The tunnel opened behind a pile of snow and rocks. They crawled out into the freezing night. The forest loomed dark and endless ahead of them. "Stay low," he said. They moved through the trees, snow crunching softly under their boots. Lyra's breath came out in white puffs. She held one hand over her wrist, trying to dull the light from the tracker. Every few seconds she looked back, sensing something behind them. Suddenly, a red beam sliced through the dark, scanning the ground near their trail. John grabbed her and pulled her behind a fallen log. The beam passed over them and moved on. But then, from deeper in the forest came the sound of mechanical growls. The hunters had unleashed drones, small spider-like machines that tracked heat and movement. John checked his rifle. Only a few charges left. He had never fought alien tech before, but he wasn't going to let her be taken. One of the drones scuttled closer, its red eye glowing. John waited until it was just a few steps away, then fired. The shot hit squarely, sending sparks into the snow. The explosion lit up the trees. "Run!" he shouted. They sprinted through the forest, branches whipping past. The night filled with distant shouts and bright flashes of light. Energy bolts tore through the trees, melting snow where they struck. Lyra stumbled once, and John caught her, pulling her along. They burst out into an open clearing near a frozen river. The moonlight shimmered on the ice. Lyra stopped suddenly and turned her face toward the sky. "They're above us," she said. A massive shadow passed overhead, an alien dropship, silent and dark, hovering low. Red lights blinked from its underside as search beams swept across the snow. John pulled her toward the riverbank. "We have to cross. The ice will break," she warned. "Better that than getting caught." They stepped onto the frozen surface. The ice groaned under their feet. Behind them, the lights grew brighter. A beam caught their trail, cutting through the dark like a blade. John grabbed her hand. "Run!" They ran across the frozen river as the beam locked onto them. Blasts of energy struck the ice, sending cracks racing in all directions. Lyra stumbled again, and John pulled her up just as the ice beneath them shattered. They plunged into the freezing water. Darkness swallowed them, and the sounds of the hunters faded into muffled echoes above. For a long moment, everything was cold and silent. Then John's hand found hers in the dark. He pulled her toward the far bank, lungs burning, heart pounding. When they finally surfaced, gasping for air, the ship was gone. Only the moonlight remained. Lyra shivered, her voice weak. "They won't stop. Not until I'm gone." John looked back across the frozen river, his breath steaming in the night air. "Then we'll make sure they never find you." The forest was silent again, but both knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The hunt had just begun. They reached the other side of the river, half frozen and exhausted. The cold bit through John's coat and made his fingers stiff. Lyra's lips were pale, her glowing skin dim. She could barely stand, yet she said nothing, only looked behind them again and again as if expecting shapes to rise from the dark. The forest ahead was thick and silent. John guided her through the trees until they found a narrow cave hidden between two frozen cliffs. Inside it was dry and dark. He gathered old branches and used his heat rod to start a small fire. Lyra sat close, her hands trembling. "They will come soon," she said quietly. "The hunters never stop once they have a signal." John poked the fire with a stick. "Then let's make sure they regret finding us." Lyra looked at him, confused. "You would fight them?" "For me?" John nodded. "You came into my home. That makes you my responsibility." For a moment she said nothing. Then a faint light returned to her eyes. "My people would never risk their lives for a stranger." "Then maybe humans are different," he said. Outside, the forest groaned with the weight of snow. The silence broke suddenly with a deep metallic hum. The ground trembled. John grabbed his rifle and crawled to the mouth of the cave. Through the trees he saw movement. 3 tall figures armored in black, their weapons glowing faint blue. They scanned the area methodically, red lights sweeping back and forth. Lyra's breathing quickened. "That's the commander and his guards," she whispered. "If they see me, they'll call the ship." John studied the terrain. "We can't outrun them. We hold here." He moved fast, spreading snow over the fire to hide the light. Then he placed his rifle near the rocks, setting the sights toward the narrow opening. Lyra stayed behind him, clutching her wrist where the faint light still blinked. Moments later, a harsh voice echoed through the forest. The alien commander spoke in a sharp, rhythmic language. Lyra translated softly. "He says the signal ends here. He knows we are close." John steadied his breath. The hunters drew closer, scanning the snow. One stopped near the entrance of the cave. John could see its tall frame now. Its armor reflected the fire's dying glow, its face hidden behind a smooth silver mask. The hunter bent low, checking the ground, then turned its head sharply toward the cave. John fired. The shot burst like thunder in the quiet night. The beam struck the alien's chest, throwing it backward into the snow. The other two shouted, weapons lighting up instantly. Blue bolts streaked through the trees, melting snow and splitting branches. Lyra screamed as one bolt grazed the rock beside her. Sparks flew, burning her arm. John grabbed her and pushed her deeper into the cave. "Stay down." The hunters advanced. John fired again, hitting another in the shoulder. The alien staggered but didn't fall. They returned fire, their weapons burning holes into the rock walls. The cave filled with smoke and heat. John's rifle battery blinked red. "Out of power," he muttered. Lyra crawled beside him, clutching the glowing band on her wrist. "I can help," she said. Before he could stop her, she pressed her hand against the ground. The air shimmered. Lines of light spread from her palm, crawling across the cave floor like living roots. A wave of energy shot forward, striking the mouth of the cave. The blast sent snow and rock flying outward, throwing the hunters off balance. John stared in disbelief. The light faded from her hand, leaving her trembling and pale. "You said you could heal," he said. "Not fight." "I didn't want to," she whispered. "But they won't stop unless I use it." The surviving hunter roared and charged. John stepped forward, grabbed a metal rod from his pack and swung with all his strength. The blow cracked the alien's helmet, sending it crashing to the ground. The forest went silent again, the snow settling slowly. John dropped to his knees, breathing hard. Lyra crawled to him, placing her glowing hand on his arm where a blast had burned through his jacket. Warmth spread through his body, the pain fading instantly. "You shouldn't have helped me," she said softly. "Now they'll send more." John gave a weak smile. "Too late for regrets. You're not dying in my watch." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. You don't understand what I am, she whispered. Maybe not, he said. But I know what I see. Someone who needs saving. Outside, the night was quiet again, but far above the clouds, faint red lights moved in formation. The next wave was coming. John loaded his last energy cell and looked at the girl beside him. Then we better get ready. The cave was quiet again, but the air felt heavy with what had just happened. The dead hunters lay half buried in snow outside, their armor still glowing faint blue in the dark. John sat near the dying fire, holding his arm where Lyra had healed the burn. The pain was gone, replaced by a strange warmth that pulsed faintly under his skin. He looked at her across the fire. She sat with her knees pulled close, her silver hair messy and face pale. The glowing lines under her skin were dimmer now, fading in and out like light behind a thin curtain. She looked weaker with every passing hour. You used your power again, he said. You shouldn't have. Lyra didn't look up. It was the only way to keep you alive. I can fight, he said. You don't need to risk yourself for me. She shook her head. It's not that simple. Every time I use it, I lose part of myself. John frowned. What do you mean? Lyra hesitated, then raised her wrist. The band around it blinked faintly. This keeps the power from burning me alive, she said softly. My people call it the binding. It keeps us under control. When they wanted to make weapons, they made us wear it. John leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Weapons? You were part of a military experiment? Yes, she said. The Empire used children from my kind. We were born with the ability to control life energy. They turned that gift into something for war. She paused, her voice barely a whisper. I escaped before they could finish the process. But they can track me anywhere. That's why they want me dead. They can't let their creation run free. John sat back, trying to absorb her words. The Empire he'd heard about in stories was cruel, but he hadn't imagined something like this. And you've been running ever since? Lyra nodded. I tried to reach the border. I thought if I could cross into human space, they wouldn't follow. But they always find me. John looked down at the tracker on her wrist. Can we take that thing off? She shook her head. If it's removed wrong, it kills me instantly. Only a specialist from my world knows how to disable it. John clenched his jaw. Then we'll find someone who can. There must be a way. Lyra gave a small, tired smile. You speak as if saving me is easy. You don't even know why you're helping. He met her eyes. Because no one deserves to be hunted like an animal. And because you're in my kitchen, remember? That makes you my guest. For the first time, she laughed softly. It was small, but it lit up her face. Humans are strange, she said again. Yeah, he replied. You keep saying that. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. John could feel exhaustion pulling at him, but his mind stayed awake. Every sound made him alert again. He knew the fight wasn't over. After some time, Lyra leaned her head back against the cave wall, her eyes half closed. When I touched you before, she said quietly, something happened. My power didn't fade like it usually does. It felt stable, balanced. John looked confused. What are you saying? She opened her eyes and met his gaze. I think your body reacts differently to my energy. Humans carry a strange frequency, something that calms it. You're keeping me alive, he blinked. You mean I'm some kind of battery? Not a battery, she said, smiling faintly. More like an anchor. When I'm near you, the energy doesn't destroy me. John rubbed the back of his neck. That's something I wasn't expecting to hear. She moved closer to the fire, her voice softer now. You don't understand how rare that is. My people fear humans. They say your kind is too unpredictable, too violent. But maybe that's what saves you. You don't follow their rules. John chuckled quietly. I'll take that as a compliment. Her smile faded, replaced by worry. You should leave me, John. They'll send more hunters, and they'll bring stronger weapons next time. He shook his head. You don't get to decide that. I'm not leaving you in the snow. Her eyes glistened faintly, reflecting the firelight. You'll die for someone you just met? John stared into the flames. Maybe, but I've lived a long time doing nothing for anyone. This feels like the first thing that matters. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire burned low and the cold crept closer. Lyra finally whispered, then I'll stay. Until you regret it. John looked up. Deal. Outside, the night sky shimmered faintly red again. Far away, beyond the clouds, ships moved slowly across the stars. The Empire had found their trail. John tightened his grip on the rifle. He didn't know what was coming next, but he knew one thing. The girl he had found in his kitchen was more than just an intruder. She was a secret that could change everything. Morning came without light. The sky was covered with thick gray clouds, and the wind carried the sound of engines far in the distance. John stood at the mouth of the cave, watching the valley below. Small dots moved across the snow, drones sweeping the forest in slow circles. The Empire had sent more hunters, just like Lyra warned. He turned back to her. She was sitting close to the fire, wrapping her silver hair with a strip of cloth to keep warm. Her eyes looked tired but calm. She already knew what he was going to say. "They're coming," John said. Lyra nodded. "I can feel them. There are many this time." He looked around the cave, checking his supplies. 1 rifle, 2 energy cells, and a small pack of food. "Not much. We can't stay here. The cave will be surrounded soon." "Then go," she said quietly. "You can still escape through the ridge." "They want me, not you." John shook his head. "I told you before, I'm not leaving you behind." She looked at him with a strange sadness. "If they capture me, they'll take me apart. If they capture you, they'll kill you slowly, just to make me talk. You don't understand what they do." "I don't care," he said. "I made my choice the moment you asked for help." Lyra's lips trembled, but she said nothing. The bond between them had grown stronger in those few days, a silent connection built on trust, fear, and something neither could name. She touched her wrist, the faint blinking light still there. "If they reach me, they'll use the tracker to locate my power source. I'll become a weapon again." "Then we destroy it," John said. She stared at him. "If we try to break it, it will kill me instantly." John thought for a moment. "What if we cut the signal, not the device? There's an old communication tower near the outpost on the far ridge. If we overload it, maybe we can jam their frequency." Lyra blinked in surprise. "You think that will work?" "I don't know," he said, loading his rifle. "But it's better than waiting here to die." They left the cave as the first flakes of snow began to fall again. The cold bit into their skin, but they kept moving, following a narrow path through the frozen woods. The forest stretched endlessly, silent except for the crunch of snow beneath their boots. Every few minutes, Lyra stopped and looked up, sensing movement in the air. "Their scanners are close," she whispered. John pointed toward the hill ahead. "We're almost there." By the time they reached the outpost, the sun was already setting. The small structure was old and rusted, covered in ice. John forced open the door and stepped inside. Dust filled the air. The control panels were dead, but the tower itself still stood tall outside, its antenna pointing toward the stormy sky. He started connecting old wires, using the portable battery from his pack. Lyra watched him silently. "You know this could kill us both if it explodes," she said softly. John smiled faintly. "Then let's make it count." The hum of the tower grew louder as the circuits came to life. Sparks jumped from the broken wires. Lyra closed her eyes, focusing her energy through the band on her wrist. The light around her began to glow brighter, merging with the faint electric field around the tower. The air crackled with power. "It's working," John said. But before he could finish, a sound split the air, a piercing whistle. Outside, engines roared. The snow lit up with bright blue light. The hunters had found them, Lyra gasped. "They're here." John grabbed his rifle and ran to the door. The first energy blast struck the tower, shaking the ground. Metal screeched as fire sparked through the circuits. Lyra fell to her knees, her power surging uncontrollably. The band on her wrist flashed red. "John," she cried. "I can't hold it." He rushed to her side, shielding her from falling debris. The tower hummed like thunder. "Stay with me," he said. "Just a little longer." The light from her skin grew blinding, filling the room. "If this overloads, everything will burn," she whispered. John held her hand tightly. "Then we burned together." For a second, there was only silence. Then a massive shockwave burst outward. The entire ridge lit up with a bright white flash that reached the horizon. When the light faded, the valley below was quiet again. The drones crashed one by one, their systems fried. The Empire's signal vanished. John lay on the floor, smoke rising from his jacket. Lyra was beside him, weak and trembling. The tracker on her wrist was dark, no longer blinking. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You cut the signal." He nodded slowly, smiling through the pain. "Told you I'd make it work." Tears filled her eyes. "You could have left and miss all this fun," he said. She laughed weakly, the sound soft and fragile. Then she rested her head on his shoulder as snow began to fall again, silent and gentle. For the first time since she crashed on this world, there was peace, But John knew it wouldn't last. The Empire would come again. They always did. Still, as he looked at the sleeping alien girl beside him, he felt something new. Hope. The blast had shaken the mountain, but the storm soon swallowed the noise. Snow fell all night, soft and endless, covering the burned trees and broken machines like a blanket of silence. The old tower stood black and twisted, smoke still rising from its metal ribs. Beneath the rubble, John slowly opened his eyes. The air was cold and sharp. His body ached, but he was alive. He pushed the fallen beam aside and sat up, coughing. The ground around him was scorched, but the snow was already starting to fall again, hiding the damage. "Lyra," he whispered, searching through the haze. He found her lying a few feet away, half buried in the snow. Her skin no longer glowed, and her breathing was faint. John crawled to her, brushing the snow off her face. She looked peaceful, almost asleep. He placed a hand on her wrist. The tracker band was dark. The light was gone. "Come on," he said softly. "Stay with me." He lifted her into his arms and carried her toward the small shelter at the base of the tower. Inside, he set her down and wrapped her in his coat. The warmth from his body slowly spread to hers, and after a long silence, her eyes fluttered open. "You're still here," she whispered. "I told you I'm not leaving," John said. She smiled weakly. "You should have." I felt the explosion. "I thought it took everything." "It almost did," he said. "But we won. The signal's gone. The hunters are gone too." Lyra looked toward the broken doorway. "They'll send more." "Maybe," John said. "But not today." For a while they stayed quiet, listening to the wind outside. The world seemed calm again, the kind of calm that comes after chaos. Lyra leaned her head against the wall, her eyes half closed. "When I used my power back there, I saw things," she said softly. "Memories. My people, my home before the Empire came. There was light everywhere. We believed we were chosen to heal the galaxy. But we were fools. Power always makes enemies." John sat beside her. "Maybe it's not about power. Maybe it's about what you do with it." She looked at him, her voice almost a whisper. "You think a single human can teach my kind that?" He smiled faintly. "One human taught you to make soup, didn't he?" Lyra laughed weakly. It was a small sound, but it warmed the cold room. "Yes," she said. "And he also made me believe kindness still exists." They watched the snow through the cracked door. The world outside was changing color, the first pale light of dawn painting the horizon in silver and gold. It felt unreal after everything they had seen. John stood slowly and looked toward the distant mountains. "When the rescue signal I sent reaches orbit, they'll come. A human ship will find us." "And if it doesn't?" she asked. "Then we walk," he said simply. "There's a settlement 50 miles west. We'll make it." She looked at him with soft eyes. "You still think you can save me?" "I know I can," he said. "Because you're still breathing." She reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "You could have let me die. My kind would have." "I'm not your kind," he said quietly. "And that's why you're still alive." They sat together as the sun slowly climbed higher, its light reflecting off the snow. The smoke from the tower drifted upward, thin and gray, fading into the bright sky. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the rising sun on her skin. "When I first came to your world," she said softly, "I thought humans were dangerous, unpredictable. But now I think maybe that's what makes you different. You don't follow reason. You follow your heart," John smiled. "Sometimes that gets us killed." "But sometimes," she whispered, "it saves someone who thought they were beyond saving." He looked at her and saw something in her eyes, something fragile and human. Maybe hope, maybe gratitude, maybe both. Hours passed. The storm was gone, leaving behind a silent white world. In the distance, faint flashes of light blinked through the clouds, human rescue beacons maybe, or another dawn beginning far beyond the mountains. Lyra leaned against John, her voice barely a breath. "You gave me something my people forgot." "What's that?" he asked softly. "A home." He looked out at the rising sun and nodded. "Then stay. You're already home." The wind carried their words into the quiet morning, and for the first time since the night he found her in his kitchen, John felt peace. The universe was still cruel, still dangerous, but in that small, frozen corner of it, 2 lives had found something worth fighting for. The light of dawn spread across the snow, washing away the shadows, and somewhere deep within the wreckage, a faint blue spark flickered, Lyra's energy stabilizing once more. It was the beginning of something new, and as the human and the alien sat side by side beneath the golden sky, it felt like the world itself was finally breathing again.